Hey everyone, and welcome to the unDavos webinar series. My name is Robin, and I'm the community coordinator on the unDavos core team, together with Mark and Dorothea. For those that are new to unDavos, unDavos is a community-driven unconference that runs in Davos alongside the World Economic Forum. And our purpose is to give everyone a stage to democratize, humanize, and bring action to Davos. Our new unDavos webinar series aims to continue the conversation between summits by keeping the pulse alive year-round through bite-sized, high-energy sessions where our community, meaning you, turn ideas into action. We recorded all the content 20+ panels during unDavos on YouTube and podcasts, so we highly recommend you to check out all the incredible ideas that was shared there. Also follow us on LinkedIn and our Luma calendar for monthly updates as we journey together towards Davos 2026. Also, if you want to join the unDavos community, reach out to Mark on his Telegram. I'll share the links in the chat for everything here. As mentioned, unDavos is a community-driven summit, meaning we make ready the stage and you host the sessions. So if you want to host a session online, apply to host a webinar either by scanning the QR code or click the webinar application link in the chat. Before we begin, a few Zoom guidelines. So we highly recommend everyone to turn on their cameras so we can see each other across the world. Also, remember to use the chat if you have any questions or want to connect with others during our session. Feel free to share what you're doing, invite others for conversation, and keep the dialogue buzzing. During our session, use the hands function if you want to ask a question or share something, and then we'll invite you to stage. And lastly, keep the energy visible by using the reaction buttons during the presentation. Lastly, this session will be recorded and also streamed on YouTube and podcast for your information. Now, shall we see? Please. There we go. Up next, we welcome Garrett Lang, an AI specialist, award-winning software inventor, and founder of the Free Thinker Institute, who will share a bold, thought-provoking proposal on how we might permanently end unjust wars. This session invites critique, collaboration, and fresh thinking toward lasting global peace. Garrett, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's great to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll do a quick additional sort of introduction, I guess, for both of myself and of course, we're talking about a tangible plan to end unjust wars. I hope you'll find that it actually is an achievable plan and actually deceptively simple. I am going to introduce the Free Thinker Institute quickly. Basically, we're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We focus on helping members be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. We have free events similar to this one on Tuesday evenings, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. And I will assume that we share our common rule, Robin, which is to remain polite. That's the only rule we have in the FTI, but we do ask people to remain polite and try to listen to other people's perspectives with an open mind. So, goals of the organization: we want to share what are our common values, which we call the FTI's intentions, which are ethical rules you can find on our website. We also want to increase positive relationships, unite the very divided world we live in, and promote win-win relationships while creating financial prosperity. So that's a little bit about the FTI for those not familiar with it. And so today's agenda, I'm basically going to define I'm going to give a little bit of historical context for how wars have been fought over time. I'm going to define what an unjust war is because you're probably curious about that when we say, what is a just war? What is an unjust war? Then I'll talk about the plan. I'll talk about why it's tangible and how it would have impacted recent unjust wars, as well as how it could prevent future wars. And then we'll take a vote at the end to see whether or not. So keep in mind right now your answer of whether or not you do or do not think that ending unjust wars is feasible. And at the end, we'll ask you whether or not you thought it was feasible at the beginning and whether or not you think it's feasible by the end. So with that said, so let's talk about the arc of progress. There's actually less human violence, more wealth and prosperity in the world than at any other time in human history. So we're actually trending in the positive, even though if you watch the news, it seems like the world's ending tomorrow. Actually, we live in the safest, healthiest, wealthiest world that humanity has ever known. That said, I think war is kind of on the run, even though there are wars going on even wars that could turn into global wars. I think we want to finish war once and for all, and not only put it on the run, but put an end to it. And I think that is achievable with the right level of coordination. And so that's what I'm going to try to describe how we can do. So let's define an unjust war. An unjust war starts by is basically a war where um, well, let's define actually a just war. Like when is a war just is if a country has violated human rights or allowed human rights to be violated without the government doing their best to try to stop those human rights violations. They've been warned of the human rights violations by an objective body like the United Nations, and the government of the country has failed to make significant efforts to fight against those human rights violations within a reasonable period of time after having been warned. I'm leaving the number of years, et cetera, to the people who want to work through those finer details. But there should be some level of warning and lack of response. And then the invading country or countries should replace the prior non-compliant government, meaning one that doesn't support human rights, with one that will address human rights for the entire population. So that's what I would consider a just war. An unjust war is pretty much any other war other than a just war. Next, I'm going to lay out the groundwork for how you end unjust wars. We start with an alliance. It's a loose alliance where any country can join very easily. If a country is found not to address human rights violations, again, as identified by an objective body like the United Nations, in their country with reasonable effort within a reasonable period of time, they will be ejected from the alliance and no longer be in that defensive alliance. Attacking any member of the alliance results in immediate removal from the alliance. You can't create an unjust war and remain in the alliance essentially. So if you attack someone, you get removed. Once removed, a country can't rejoin for some reasonable period of time. Now, here's the kicker. If any member of the alliance is invaded, every other member of the alliance has to make a best effort attempt to defend that member of the alliance or be rejected from the alliance themselves for not coming in defense. So basically, what would happen is the alliance could, over time, slowly coordinate invasions with exit strategies of states that have human rights violations under their purview. It would require coordinated invasions by the entire alliance, potentially, to remove those in power and put in place a new stable government, ideally democratic, or at least one that represents the entire population in a meaningful way and ensures that the entire population has human rights and the opportunity to thrive. For those that weren't at my event last night on who should be obtaining power, I think the people that are put into positions of power should be the ones that are supporting the population as a whole, not the typical Machiavellian put in a puppet government that's beholden to the person who put them in and not actually representative of the population they're supposed to be governing. So this would be a representative government that supports human rights. And gradually, this could be done state by state as the military alliance's strength gets stronger and stronger. And it can be done slowly over time, but with enough time, I think we would actually be able to end all states that cause human rights violations and truly have a world that's free, entirely free of human rights violations, at least state-sanctioned human rights violations. or state ignored human rights violations. Oh, sorry about that. So next is addressing nuclear powers. So sure, nuclear powers is an issue. So for states with nuclear weapons, you need to take a lot of care to sort of siege them with sanctions, economically isolating them in a coordinated way so that the entire alliance doesn't trade with them until they relent. There are probably other clandestine ways to deal with states like that that I'm not privy to without clearances. And if I had the clearances, I couldn't talk about them anyway. So that said, eventually their economy would probably become so weak that they can't even maintain their nuclear weapons or the quality of life that even their leadership would want. And so eventually, the idea would be to offer their leadership a better life, not punish them for necessarily the crimes they committed, but giving them a better solution outside of ruling their country where they could actually live in a part of the world in like a witness protection program type of thing, sip margaritas on a beach, and in doing so, we give them an incentive to leave their life of maltreatment of people and create new democratic leadership to rise up and let the country's population have a better future. Next is the implementation pathway. So let's talk about actual path to making this happen. It starts with NATO, right? NATO has the biggest military alliance in the world. So I think NATO should just join this alliance immediately. And then every country that doesn't have human rights violations would quickly join after that. So I think we would get rapid expansion, and then there would be slow global normalization where if any country did violate the rule of of invading another country, and they were quickly put down with the might of the entire free world, then I think that countries would quickly learn that invading countries is no longer acceptable from a global perspective. Doing that, just proving a few examples, will create so much of a disincentive for anyone to invade anywhere that I don't think people would invade anymore. So, now let's look at some historical examples of how this would have played out with some pretty significant, some recent, some a little further back um, wars. So if we go far back to Tibet, which clearly would have joined the alliance, China probably never would have invaded Tibet if it knew that the entire free world would have come to defend Tibet. But who's going to go defend a bunch of Buddhists in Chinese part of the world, is how it was looked at. And of course, no one did. So we know how that worked out. Now, if we go then to the Iraq War, most of the free world told the US that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And some of us were agreeing with them, although even left-wing and right-wing media agreed that they thought there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But if the US had known that if we had gone into Iraq, we would have been ejected from the alliance and that NATO would have defended Iraq, there's no way we would have gone into Iraq, right? Now, we got a bunch of people to agree with us and go in with us, but it would have created a world war. And so it would have created a huge disincentive. The US would never have gone into Iraq in the first place. And we wouldn't have created ISIS with the power vacuum that was left from Iraq, which was quite a problematic group, or still is really. Um, Next, if you look at the Ukraine invasion, if Ukraine tried to enter NATO and if they had entered NATO, Russia probably never would have invaded. Unfortunately, NATO did not have the foresight to allow them to join. And so, if there was this loose alliance where they could have joined, it would have created instant peace for all of the Ukrainian country and also all the other neighbors of Russia that are now nervous because Russia has invaded Ukraine. So, some of whom have already tried to join NATO or join NATO. So, I think it would have been pretty clear how that would have played out. The Gaza war is a little more complicated. So, if it was shown that Hamas was honoring human rights, they would have actually been defended by Israel's offensive. But the truth is, Gaza or Hamas was not honoring human rights, and so the chances are good that they would have been susceptible to attack. And seeing them destroyed the way that they have been would have sent a message to the rest of the world And by the way, I did another event on the Israeli Gaza situation, and I don't think the way that it was played out was good. So I'm not trying to say that it was or that it is. I just saw a recent video of some of the horrific things going on there, and it's pretty bad. I think that but I don't want to digress on that. What I will say is that showing an example that a country who doesn't honor human rights and allow their have their country representatives or their government representing the people, where the government are not representing the people, would have basically sent a message to all other countries that don't support human rights that they better start supporting human rights, or else they're going to be subject to being invaded and having, basically being destroyed by stronger neighbors or stronger global neighbors, no matter where those neighbors are in the world. Um, and that they would have been replaced by a government that supports human rights, which I hope will be the end game of what happens in Gaza. We'll find out whether a democratically elected, peaceful government is able to be put in place. In any event, I will go to the next slide. So transformative long-term effects of this are basically, if we look into the future, it, it creates a huge disincentive to cause any kind of human rights violations, because doing so leaves your entire country vulnerable to invasion, and the leaders are personally vulnerable to international trial if they're not killed by war, if someone comes in violently. Now, remember, I said the leaders have a peaceful out if they come out peacefully, but if they actually get invaded and taken over, then they go on trial for war crimes. So that gives a huge disincentive for governments that are unethical to stay in their positions of power, and it gives them an incentive to get out of their positions of power. It also creates this alliance creates a huge disincentive for invading any country unjustly, because doing so results in a huge force, and the invasion will almost certainly be prevented. And actually, if you think about Taiwan, if the entire free world was intending to defend Taiwan, China would have no chance invading them. But that's not necessarily how it is. And war games play out in different ways. Won't digress on that too much, but you get the general idea. Um, Essentially it won't be worth it for any country for to invade anywhere, because there's so much of a disincentive to invade, because so much force would be used to prevent that invasion defensively. Now, it would also, over time, result in a drastically reduced military spend, because members of the alliance are protected by so many other members that they can spend less on military, although we have to be sure that the entire alliance has more military force than the people who are not in the alliance. But as the alliance grows and countries with unethical and governments get removed and ethical governments get put in place, the amount of money spent on military would go down and down. And eventually, when we have, you know, peace across the world and no government supporting human rights violations, there won't really be much need for a military anymore. Now, you have to imagine I am a futurist, right? So I'm imagining a future world that's a far ways off, but you can kind of extrapolate from what I proposed there and see that possible future where military spending would drastically decrease. Um, and next, I want to say, and I didn't do a slide for this one, but I was thinking about disputed territories. And for disputed territories, I would say that that would not necessarily be called an invasion because they're disputed, and that it would go to some sort of arbitration from an objective body like the UN. So that would be my plan for disputed territories. That said, I'm sure there are other questions that people have that that you may not have answers to. And I don't know if you can do the poll again, because I hadn't quite finished the presentation when you did it. Um, is it possible to do the poll again, Robin?
Sure.
Yeah. Um, so that said, now I want to take questions. Are people able to unmute themselves, or do you have to unmute?
Now they're able to unmute.
Perfect. So I'd love to take questions. and would love to see the answers to that poll as well. And would love to take questions. Just raise your hand if you have any questions. VJ, you first.
Yeah, so I believe your plan to like end wars like seems pretty reasonable. But do you have like as someone who comes from an organization that like is trying to like, end global poverty, do you have like any plans to like end global poverty or end hunger?
Yeah, BJ, you're great. I love you, man. Like you're like, hey, you can end war. Let's end the poverty too. Actually, you noticed in the beginning, and I am thinking about that, BJ. So absolutely. So you noticed in the beginning that create financial prosperity is part of the Freethinker Institute's goals. The goal of the FTI is to create an organization that someday will allow every human being on Earth make the modern USD equivalent in the US in purchasing power parity of $100,000 USD a year in an average US town. Now, that's not economically feasible with the amount of wealth in the world today, but the way that things are growing economically and with the advent of AI within the next 50 years, that should be not only feasible, it would be pretty unethical to not have that. Now, the way to do that is by creating let me not digress too much, but say that if you come to our Freethinker Institute events on YouTube, you'll see an economic plan that would get the US to be much more prosperous. If you look at our video on how to use ChatGPT to figure out what your dream job is and get a valuable skill set doing it, you'll see that pretty much anyone with access to the internet can learn their dream job and get a valuable skill set doing it, and then volunteer at a company for a period of time to get experience and then get a job doing your dream job and making a good income. There's also something that I'll mention called Ikigai, which is a Japanese. Let me actually see if I can pull up the image. It's a Japanese framework that basically says I always forget the four things, but it's you combine what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. And when you combine all four of those things, then you can make a good living doing something that you love and enjoying it. And so I think everybody should look for what their ikigai is. And that would be a good step towards ending global poverty. Not only ending global poverty, but going a step beyond, which is what the FTI wants to do, which is to end the people who are not happy because they don't have enough money, and that comes at about 100,000 USD a year, where there's actually a cut turning point where more money essentially doesn't create much more happiness over $100,000 USD a year. We all want more money, don't get me wrong, but the truth is scientifically, it's a logarithm of the amount of money you make that is equal to your happiness, and so there's really not a lot of happiness coming from money over $100,000 a year. Whereas under $100,000 a year, more money creates much more happiness.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Who else has questions or comments? Just reflections. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Dan, go ahead. Good to see you.
Hey, morning.
Hey,
Thanks, thanks for the presentation. It makes sense to me. I mean, I've never come across these different types of ideas that I'm hearing, and it's really encouraging. But the last little while, I've been thinking about people much like yourself in terms of like what motivates you for this much. Is the word altruism?
yeah, altruism is when you want to give more to others than you take for yourself.
Wow, it's amazing, man. Because so much of the stuff that I've been exposed to and picking up and learning, and I'm thinking to myself. Like, could I do that? Right? Like, can I
You
give
do,
as much as
Dan. You
that?
do.
Right?
I know you, and you do. So you can do more of it probably, but you already do it.
Because Garrett, the stuff I'm being exposed to here, and I mean, I've been around the internet a little bit, and I'm picking up here, picking up stuff there. Like, this is gold, man.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are angry, upset, sad, and want to blame other people for their problems rather than looking inward at like, how can I make my life happier? And the truth is, studies show that giving to others and helping others, being an altruist, actually makes people happier. There's also a lot of bad wisdom that gets tossed around that altruism isn't real. Although by one definition of altruism, that's literally impossible to meet by definition. That's true. But by the regularly used definition of altruism, which just means putting other people first, most of us are altruists to some degree. It's just a matter of how much. And I would argue the more you try to help others, the more others will help you back. And so, actually, even if you're an egotist, and I had this conversation with an egotist who agreed with me, even if you're an egotist, the winning strategy is to be an altruist and to help others. And then those others will be better connections, like you'll have better relationships with them, and you end up in a better place overall. So, um,
Wow. Because even last night when I heard that a comment to the effect of people in power or government should be, should lean towards an altruistic, personality, right? And
yeah.
and that just like that's like wow, those are the kind of people, the world needs, right? To write policy, right? So
Exactly. If we had
wow.
altruists in power, we wouldn't have nearly as many problems as we do. And actually, in preparation for this, I didn't get a slide up in time, but I looked at the countries that are violating human rights or allowing human rights to be violated. And unfortunately, the United States is one of those debated cases right now because of the mass incarceration, the detention center conditions, and other items. So we ourselves would need to get our house in order for this to all work.
Do you think that humanity is trending towards being more selfish,
No.
especially with the advent of no,
I don't
you
think
don't
so.
think so?
I think that there is an aspect of that, but I think, Steven Pinker's book Enlightenment Now says that we live in the safest, wealthiest, healthiest world that humanity has ever known. I agree with that. I think one problem is a lot of people communicate much more often via text today than they do via voice and in person. And text is, I like to joke, the worst way of communicating other than smoke signals, right? But like it's a really bad way of communicating. And so we really need to when something gets tense in text, pick up a phone and talk to someone, and usually it can be resolved through a conversation and hearing tone of voice and knowing someone's actual intent through tone of voice. Because 80% of communication is nonverbal. So I do think there's a problem today with the fact that most communication seems to be via text, and that's just not a good way to communicate. And that's why in the FTI we have our Discord server, which if you go to our website, you'll see our Discord server. And in the Discord server, you can jump from text to voice chat in just a second. It's very easy. So that way people, if they get tense, can talk about it. Um, thank you, Dan. Gene, I want to get to your
Right
question.
on, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, can you hear me, Garrett?
Yeah, go
Am
ahead.
I unmuted?
Loud
Okay.
and clear.
Hi. Um, I just appreciate the presentations because you teach us the reality of the situations we're in, but then you always give that viewpoint of how we can correct it. And I like this presentation. I just wish that this could happen. I'm still a little cynical. And I, I mean, I like that you say you think there's enough altruistic people in the world, but in my community, I don't see it, a lot of rich people here and, they don't seem to want to share or have concern about others um, that are less fortunate. And I myself, I haven't done enough. I'm retired now and I am looking for a way to feel better about, and give back. I am looking for that. But I'm listening to this and I'm hopeful more listening to this for the future. It's a very bad time right now. I do tend to get depressed and anxious, but I like this approach here is a wonderful way to think about it. I hope it can happen. Like, I don't understand why NATO isn't more like that, have
Right.
those ethical, fair, anti-war ways. Uh, to promote in the world. Yeah, I wish. But thank
Yeah.
you. It was very, very enlightening.
Thank you, Gene. That,
Yeah.
when I came up with the solution, I was like, you know what? This isn't really complicated. it's not rocket science. Why aren't we doing this today? And the only thing I could come to the conclusion is that the leaders of today are not the ones that want this. And to the point,
Exactly.
there don't seem to be a lot of altruists around. We're out there, right? There are altruists out there. The thing is we have to identify who those altruists are and then encourage them to run for office. Because those are usually the people who are like, well, what if it happens to me? What if I get corrupted? And they're so worried about that, but really they're the ones that are the least likely to be corrupted, right? The ones who just jump in and say,
Mm.
oh, I'm going to be fine and nothing can possibly go wrong are often the ones that you don't want to be in positions of power. So, and I put my email in the chat, Gene. I would love to chat with you about how you can give back and maybe do that as a part of the FTI. We have different ways that you can contribute if you're interested in that to sort of our path to trying to make the world a better place, which starts from the six intentions.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you very
Sure.
much.
No problem. Thank you for your comment. And anyone else have questions or yeah, Derek, go ahead.
I'm wondering, I know this was very brief and broad overview of it. Is there like a platform, like just when you're talking about people running for office, is there like a platform that maybe politicians could run on that they support a plan like this so that it would inspire other the altruistic voters to say, I want this plan and I want to put in people into office that'll support this on the global stage and advocate it for the US or whatever country you're from to support it
Yeah.
in the UN and NATO alliances.
You have some spare time, Derek? Because I could put you to work creating that platform. I can help.
Got you. Okay. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm really interested. I found you yesterday and I've been
yeah.
looking at the links. I'm going to look into it and I want to see how I can help. So,
Yeah,
I love
honestly,
everything I've
I
been hearing so far.
I think that if we put together the a bunch of the presentations that I've had in the past, we could create a platform, one that's not only US centric, but eventually could be more international. But right now would, probably start out as US centric platform. But I do think it would be nice to have a platform that people could adopt if they want to and run on. So I think it's a great idea. I just don't have the time to do it right now, so I could use some help, but I can give the ideas and plant the seeds, but I can't do the whole platform thing right now. So great suggestion. Carly, good to see you.
Good morning, Garrett. Yeah, thanks again for doing this. I love your presentations. Been pointing your YouTube channel to more and more people too. So
Thank
I
you.
think that's a good start is to just do more of these, like you said, in person,
Yeah,
rather than just recorded and rather than just via text or whatnot. I wanted to give you a shout out for throwing your presentation into the chat. That was really generous. Because I always intend to go back and rewatch stuff, but it really helps when it's here in the present too. So thank you
yeah.
for putting all the effort and work into slides and yeah, hosting people. The more that we get people to kind of understand that we are full of agency in some manner, we can make a difference.
We are, and we had a presentation that I gave on free will, which was actually our most popular one since we kind of grew out of a philosophy community. And we had over 80 people when I presented why I think we do have libertarian free will. So we do have agency. We can make these decisions. We can change the future. And even if you're a determinist, most determinists think that we have free will anyway, although I don't think that's a coherent belief. It still believing in free will is better than not believing in it. Even if you think we don't have it, but you believe in it, at least you believe in it. So, yeah. So, no hands up. So I'm going to take a question from the chat, which is how would you overcome human greed? The people in charge are mostly selfish. So I would argue that's what democracy is for, is to vote into positions of power, people who are altruists, who aren't after the money. The other thing is, one of my housemates when I moved to New York City was from Singapore. And I was talking with him about Singapore and why they don't have corruption there. Well, there are different reasons, but one of the reasons is that they pay their politicians so well that money is not really going to make them happier anymore. So there's less need to bribe people, right? Whereas we have a president who got a not only a gift of a $400 million plane, but the US government is apparently spending $1 billion to outfit that plane with lots of extra gizmos and gadgets, even though the plane will never be ready until after he leaves office, assuming that he does leave office after his 4 years, which I hope he will. So I guess that doesn't totally answer the question. How do you overcome human greed? You vote into power people who aren't greedy. You vote into power people who want to give back to the community, that really want a way of service. So that's really the answer, and that's for iPhone 16e. Your name's not there, so I'm just gonna read what I see. And ultimately, right, I think that it's important, if you find your ikigai, you too can make money. I'm a big fan of the effective altruist movement. I'm trying to get more involved with that. I love what they're doing, which is try to make money and then use the money that you make to do good in the world, which is the essential idea of effective altruism. And I've been, on that path as well, because I feel like in the modern world, like it or not, money is a way that you can have a much greater influence. And so I think it makes sense to try to seek money and try to use that money to make the world a better place. And you can also join the Free Thinker Institute. And I'm not so good at self-promotion, but I will say, join the Free Thinker Institute, and we're trying to make the world a better place, one step at a time. And so you'll have collaborators that have common goals with you. And yeah, iPhone 16e, you should be able to speak, just unmute yourself. And then we'll have Mark after you.
Oh, okay. No, yes, I did want to thank you for your presentation. But it's just seems so impossible that how do you get these people out, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's where it's a slow, concerted effort, right? And essentially, if we can create this defensive alliance and we can stop the current unjust wars by the bigger folks, and we take out the smaller countries one at a time that are, harboring human rights violations, you know, then if we show that it'll work on a smaller scale, and then gradually the world becomes more and more free and wealthy, and we help, create trade across all of the countries that are part of the alliance, an economic alliance could be part of this as well, create trade amongst the members of the alliance that is favored trade. There's a whole bunch of things that could be done to sort of give an incentive to be a part of the alliance, and give countries a reason to come over voluntarily rather than through force. But then, if necessary, slowly over time, force could actually force their hand and bring them over. So I prefer the peaceful solution. I'm a big fan of Sun Tzu, who basically, said you should win the war without swinging a sword or shedding any blood. And that's why I said, like, in the case especially of nuclear weapons, but even in other cases, if leaders of these countries will just give up their position of power, let's let them do it, and let's put them in a witness protection program and put them drinking margaritas on a beach somewhere for the rest of their lives, and then save that country from the human rights violations that they're having to go through today. That said, I want to let uh, Mark go. Thanks for coming, Mark. Great to have you here. Mark is kind of the king of unDavos, if I can label him that. He would never label himself that way, but I would love to say he's like the one of the founders, if not the founder. And so I'm just honored to be here and have you here. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's wizard rather than king. Somebody else is the
Wizard,
king,
thank you.
somebody else is the mayor.
Thank
Wizard,
you.
wizard is fine.
Wizard is
Um,
cool.
the so I mean, I treat this session very much as just a sort of a springboard for ideas and conversation, because
Definitely.
it's obviously entirely and utterly unfeasible from many, many different angles. If we look at, let's say, the concept of human rights value, sort of violations, there have been relatively few wars in the last 200 years that have been fought for human rights violations. Most often it's territory incursions and everything else. So there are really few. In addition to that, one person's human rights can be interpreted in a different way. Another one could be what specific human rights, what level of human rights would then initiate a thing? Is it the percentage of a population incarcerated? Is that considered to be qualified? Next is that these countries are democracies. Because they are democracies, and NATO is full of largely democracies, and mostly are democracies, they have governments that change over time, different demands. There is a security system that is in place that does this, but even then, they have many constraints that they have, and these are sort of worked examples. And then, I mean, I did find it, whatever, sort of, let's call it sort of totalitarian and scary at the end. I think you made a comment, and I guess our 11 AI transcribers will tell me what the comment was. But that I think you're implying that as this thing grows and there are countries that don't want to adapt this defense framework, then if they don't go voluntarily, we could coerce them with force to come join us, which means that they don't have a human rights violation. It's just that we're not joining our club.
No,
So
it does
again,
mean that they have it does mean that they have
I,
human rights violations. So they would not be able to be
I,
invaded unless they had human rights violations that they were sanctioning or harboring.
And you started and I appreciate that you did mention, okay, the US is going more and more in a strange direction. You're literally living
Yes.
in the US, where right now they're
Oh, yeah.
clearly going in the other direction.
Correct.
Other direction.
Correct.
And so, I mean, right now, I mean, hopefully you're still able to have this level of freedom of conversation over the next 4 years.
Right.
But I'm living in Germany right now, in Berlin, where in the early 1930s they just sort of, this sort of crazy pants was in charge, and little did they know what was going to happen next. But so as a sort of springboard for lots of interesting conversations, it's good, interesting, as any type of viable roadmap or anything else, not a chance in a million billion years.
Okay. Well, I'll respect.
And not even pieces of it either. It just
Yeah.
it's too much. There's too much today, and
Right.
there's too much weight of 1,000 years of history in most places.
I think what you're saying is that no one has done this before and that rarely have people fought wars for human rights. And so you think it's unfeasible that anyone could start to do it. I think you're also saying that human rights violations need to be adjudicated by someone, and I basically proposed the UN for that. Is there some reason you think the UN is not capable of assessing whether or not human rights violations were happened?
The United Nations as a
Yeah.
start, that would be one of the starting points. The
Yep.
United Nations itself is a by and large vaguely functional entity. It's reliant for 40% of its money on one country. And we've already seen when the United States pulled out funding from a number of things that immediately changed all of the behaviors and actions of those particular entities. When you have, let's say, arbitration things such as The Hague International Court of Justice, you're talking about a decade plus, and then at the end they're toothless because they have no enforcement. So I think it's nice, it's fantastical, but I mean, I think there's more reality in a Harry Potter novel.
It's fine. I guess I addressed the whether or not you can violate human rights. You also did say that no one has fought wars for human rights before, and so
No, I didn't. I said I know. I didn't
very
say no.
rarely. You
No,
said very
again,
rarely. Sorry,
yes,
very
that's why. Yeah, very
rarely.
rarely.
Yes, very rarely.
I'm very aware of AI transcript these days to actually look at
Yes.
words, and I'm
No, you're
fascinated
right.
by
You're
words.
right.
It's about there's about 10-ish wars. I had GPT do a little deep research study for me, and there's very few. There are a lot of territorial stuff. And
Correct.
when you begin to look at those are therefore just wars, and there are loads and loads of therefore just wars. So maybe you're talking about a problem that fundamentally doesn't really exist,
Wait,
because
why
also for
would you
human
say that?
rights,
Why would you say that a
um,
territorial war is a just war?
no, because your definition, you had humanitarian wars. You were sort of fighting wars about a sort of humanitarian basis.
I'm
So
saying that
there's
you can
breaking of human rights.
I'm saying you can only declare war on someone who is a govern with a country whose government violates human rights or is allowing human rights to be violated without trying to stop them. And so any territorial war, like, I went through the examples of Ukraine,
Yeah,
that would not be a just war, right? It would not be considered a just war. And so the entire free world would have, if this alliance existed, converged on Ukraine and defended them from Russia, and Russia would have summarily been kicked out.
I think already, given that you have so one of the things that I like, the sort of Davos type of conversations, is that so like sort of there are these sort of fringes of ideas that go out there, and maybe some elements of that can sort of reach into today, but we all live in today,
Right.
and we basically the next 3 years has pretty much been written because there's just inertia, there's master systems and everything else. Unless you're looking at Armageddon or pandemics, the next 3 years have been written for this sort of geopolitics type of stuff. And so we already see how Ukraine works. We already see how Gaza works. We already have worked examples where we have existing systems in place. Those people running those systems aren't going to disappear tomorrow. They're all going to there. They're all going to be alive, unless whatever you want to shoot them, which would definitely be a violation
No,
of human
that's
rights.
not what I proposed.
So right now, then all of the today has massive mass, and so right now there's no let's say ideas or roadmap as to how you might even start to go there. Right, well, isn't even an indication that anybody would be interested.
Well,
And so therefore, it's that's why I said it's like it's sort of a nice fantasy out there as a sort of springboards to have ideas, but there's nothing, whatever, like there's nothing that one could actually hold on to afterwards apart from an interesting conversation.
Well, I guess I'm hearing something different from everybody else here, which is that, hey, this sounds like a feasible solution. I've heard you disagree with the solution and call it fantastical and more fiction than a Harry Potter novel. But the only two things that you addressed as concerns, I think I sort of settled.
I
So
could have had 1,000 other concerns.
go ahead. Maybe name the biggest one first, and let's handle them one
Oh,
at a time. We have
no,
time.
no,
We have another 15 minutes.
yes, I mean, I don't. I have another appointment that I have to get off to.
Okay.
But I mean, right now, there's an existing NATO. NATO already exists. What
Yes.
do you think NATO would think about a new defense structure that would coming up?
Well,
How would they respond?
I
Would they come up to you in open arms and say, "Look, we must have a conversation immediately. My goodness, we've been missing this piece." How would they respond? Because they already exist.
Right. So all these countries exist, the leaders exist, but that doesn't mean those leaders are going to stay in power all the time. If we as a population vote in place leaders who want this solution, then the solution becomes feasible. It starts from
Which
grassroots
country?
democracy. All
From,
countries,
I
like
mean,
all countries, right? Like this requires the leaders to agree.
how many countries would need to have this as a democratic element so that according to the election cycles of those countries they could possibly go in where this is the specific issue that is not more important than cost of living, education, or healthcare.
So
And I think you'd struggle to pick one country.
I
And I
mean,
mean, it's the so I don't see that there's a lot of democratic country. I mean, there's a lot of precedent to like we want peace. So certainly in Ukraine, they would like to have peace, although
right.
not at any cost.
Well, I think Derek kind of gave a good example of the solution to what you're talking about, which is to create a platform on which, I don't think you have to choose between the things that you mentioned, healthcare, cost of living, et cetera, and this. This isn't actually increasing the cost of living in any significant way. It's not hurting anyone economically in any significant way. So you're not choosing between one or the other. You could get both, actually.
There are a number of countries right now that are benefiting greatly from cheap Russian oil and gas because has sanctions, and they're able, like India particularly, is benefiting from having much, much cheaper oil and gas because of a war. So there are many people that are benefiting from the existing thing. It's not as whatever the sort of binary as the sort of as you imagine. And then also, what level of human rights violations are necessary to tip the scale?
Well,
And
that's
already, I mean,
again binary.
and Iraq had a coalition of the willing to go in, but that was a territorial invasion.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, and ISIS, by the way, came at the back end of Syria rather than Iraq, which that was Al Qaeda was the other one. Al Qaeda was the one from Iraq.
Right. So
Which was good.
I gave the Iraq example and said that the US would not have gone into Iraq if this alliance had existed. Like there's no way that the US would have gone in because there would have been other countries that were not part of the alliance of the willing that would have defended Iraq against the US invasion. And just that deterrent would have stopped the US from going into Iraq, which would have saved a huge amount of expense and cost, et cetera. So the other thing, as far as lots of people benefiting from wars, sure, there are lots of people benefiting from wars, but more people suffer from wars than benefit from them. And so what you have to do is get the average person standing up and saying, look, we want peace. Peace is profitable. We make more money in peacetime. We could spend less on military if we had peace. And all the benefits of peace need to be talked about. And people need to know that this is realistic. People need to know that it is feasible. And by knowing that it's realistic and feasible and taking steps to accomplish it, it becomes more realistic.
I mean, I do actually need to go now to go to prep for my next meeting. But thank you very much for joining. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody, as
thanks
well.
for
Thank you,
having
Robin,
me.
for hosting.
Thanks for having me.
And but yes, good little debate. And I'll say bye now.
All right, take care, Mark. Other questions? I'm gonna look into the chat. Yeah, and Jason, I agree. Like internet interaction is often better because it's authentic people. And some media is more trustworthy than others. I think it's important when you get surprised by media to fact check the media because whenever I get emotional about something that the media is saying, if it's not just like celebrating or not celebrating, but complaining about like all the horrible things going on in the world objectively, then when it's like internal left versus right sort of conflict, I find that the media, some media actually lies and makes stuff up. So it's important to fact check the media. But you also have to fact check individuals as well and know that there are objective sources that agree with those individuals. So, it's important to know that what you believe is grounded in reality. Any other questions or thoughts?
Somebody mentioned, Garrett, about interacting, via internet. I would say also do it locally.
Yeah,
Um,
I
to
agree.
just grab a meetup or put up a handwritten note at a coffee shop about being at a certain place at a certain time to discuss something and try to do that whole listening to learn and talking with people rather than talking at people. I mean,
Yeah,
you're good at talking at people in presentations, so thank you for that. But
sure.
yeah,
I also tried to
interacting
listen to
with other
Mark,
people
right?
takes, yeah, well,
I
it
also,
takes practice. We
yeah,
have to learn how to respect other people's ideas, even if they do differ from ours, and then we learn more that way. But yeah.
yeah. And I also tried to listen carefully to Mark and ask him questions to make sure I understood his perspective. And I felt like I understood his perspective and it addressed his concerns, but he clearly had other concerns that he didn't have time to share. So hopefully I'll hear about those sometime in the future or, and try to be able to address them then. But um, so yeah, and the other thing is, Carly, if anyone is interested in starting a like an FTI pod or an FTI group locally to sort of bring together people that like to talk about this type of stuff, feel free to reach out to me for that. I'll put my email in the chat again.
We can do that through the Free Thinkers Institute website, right?
Yep, you can reach
Okay.
out to me on Discord through the Freethinker Institute website. I don't remember. We might have an email up on there as well. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Garrett.
yep, no problem. Um, so Darren, go ahead.
Hi. So I missed most of your presentation, so if you've already covered covered what I'm about to ask you, then please just
Okay.
ignore me. But I'm curious about what I did look at your slides that you put in the chat, so that was helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm curious though what you think of the possibility of a world state, because with the world state, there won't be countries to fight against each other. So at least on this purely logical, analytical level, that
Right.
might seem to solve some problems. And then the other thing I'm curious about is if you imagine there to be an economic aspect to that alliance or league of democracies that you talk about in the slides, because I think that could be a powerful attractor for states to want to join, if not for human rights reasons, then at least for the economic benefits of
State,
being part of such an alliance.
yeah,
And also,
state the
it
second thing that
would.
you said again. I'm sorry, Darren. I want to make sure I write it down so that I can respond to it appropriately.
Okay. Well, so the second thing I'm curious about is whether you think there will be an economic aspect to that security and political alliance between democracies that
Yeah.
you discussed in the slides.
Yep.
And I just think it would seem to be well, I think it would mean that because these countries share ideals of human rights, at least as we're imagining this right now, that they would also perhaps also trade fairly and treat each other fairly. and also just having such an alliance with this economic aspect could be a powerful attractor for countries to want to join such an alliance, um, maybe just for the economic benefits at first, but of course they would also have to meet the human rights standards. Um, and I think, and I think just maybe a corollary of this would be, and I'll be curious whether you think this would be a good idea for such free countries, if they were to form such an alliance, or if, they're heading in that direction, to also decouple themselves economically from countries that are, authoritarian, autocratic, or totalitarian. Um, and that would be a very long process and difficult process, but I'm just wondering if you think that might be a good idea. Yeah, so that's it. Just the world state thing, and also the economic aspect to this alliance that you're talking about.
Yeah, super good questions, Darren. I think the world state is something that's so far off. I don't even see it, and I usually think in very long terms. I really value the diversity of the world and the different cultures, having lived abroad and traveled quite a bit around the world. And I think that we want to retain that cultural heritage and the diversity that the world offers, but doing it in a way that's peaceful, where there's no physical conflict and confrontation, is really an ideal end state. I'm not a big fan of the one world state idea for that reason, because I think you could lose some of the cultural diversity by doing that. But maybe if there was peace globally for a long enough time, and there may not need to, that might be a feasible thing, and you might still be able to retain that cultural diversity within one world state. But it's not something that I would push for right now. Um, to answer your first question, for the second one, yeah, this event is actually, and to Mark's point about like conversations bring up ideas, and you know, um, I think Mark's point about gasoline being much cheaper in India, being like a good benefit for the Russian sanctions for India, is a good point, and there should be better there should be like some sort of financial structure that bolsters the alliance, as well as being a military alliance. So I agree. I think that makes sense. I have to think through that, because I do my best thinking in quiet time, not on the spot. So I can't come up with an economic solution off the cuff right now. But it's a good idea, and I'm going to try to spend some time to think about it, and I'll probably present it at the FTI at some point. So what other questions do people have?
Maybe do a last question.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes. Thanks for catching me on the time, Robin.
Garrett, what are the what do you think should be done for UNO to be more effective?
What is the UNO? Sorry.
United Nations.
Oh, I didn't. I always hear UN. So I think this would make the United Nations much more effective. So by helping the United Nations be the arbiter of what constitutes someone being in or out of the alliance, it would actually solve the biggest problem that the UN has right now, which is that they have no teeth. This would literally more or less give the UN the teeth of the entire free world, not to send at its beck and call to invade hapless countries, but rather in the way that they can decide who is furthering human rights in a way that should be considered acceptable versus who is unacceptable. And that's something that I think the UN is in the best position to sort of make that type of decision. Does that make sense, Himanshu?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Great. You want to wind up, Robin?
Sure. Thank you so much, Garrett, for sharing your ideas. And if people want to learn more, you can check out freethinkerinstitute.org. That's the address in the chat. Feel free to write the domain there again. We will send out all the details as a summary on newsletter, so people will get all the insights. Also, this podcast will also become a podcast on YouTube, so people can see the presentation later, and also to continue the conversation. Should we see? Yeah, that was all for today. The invitation is open. If you would like to host a unDavos webinar, we're curating fresh voices from the community all the time. So feel free to check out our links here. And when that is said, thank you so much for joining with your energy and for your presence today. And see you all on unDavos Summit 2026. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.